Hello and welcome to Unacademy IAS English, a one-stop destination for the English medium civil services aspirants. A very good morning and welcome to the most comprehensive Hindu analysis on YouTube. So let's begin today's discussion by first looking at the topics that we are going to discuss. From the Delhi edition of the Hindu, I have chosen 10 important articles for a detailed and comprehensive analysis so that you don't have to go back and read the newspaper again. And if you guys are liking our initiatives, if you feel these sessions are benefiting in your preparation, do let us know through your comments. Don't forget to press the like button and do subscribe to our channel. Now, before we start the analysis, I have a couple of important announcements and I want you to pay attention. So those who are preparing for 2026 and 2027, you have a golden opportunity to subscribe to Unacademy IAS English online classroom program. The new batch, the Ignite batch, is all set to begin from 28th February in a couple of days. And as a pre-launch offer, Unacademy is providing a one-time discount, a flat 60% off on our IAS courses. You can avail our 15-month subscription at just $23,499 and an 18-month subscription at $24,999. This offer will give you access to all the online classes by our top educators, as well as the study material, the test series, and even the mentorship and doubt resolution sessions. Now, to avail this offer, all you have to do is enter the code IAS English. Many students have been asking that we are not able to avail this offer. See, please note that you need to enter the code IAS English to avail the flat 60% off. The offer ends today. So do enroll immediately. The link is provided in the video description so that you can get started with your preparation from 28th of Feb. Then, if you know anyone who's preparing for IIT, JEE and NEET, please inform them. Let them know that Unacademy is conducting a mega event on the 1st of March, Unacademy Arambh, where the students can get to meet their top educators, then as well as important celebrities and influencers, including popular cricketer Jasprit Bumrah. So this would be your online event on the JEE Nexus by Unacademy YouTube channel from 7 p.m. to 9 p.m. So if you are in touch with any IIT, JEE and NEET aspirants, do let them know to attend this event, as they could gain a lot of insights about the exam and they even stand to win a lot of rewards and exciting rewards as well. So let's get started with the discussion. Please ensure you join my Telegram channel by scanning the QR code, because after the session ends, I'll be sharing the PDF on my Telegram channel. So with this, let's begin today's discussion by looking at this important article on page number 10. This column explores one of the most controversial issues in our country right now, the language issue or the language wars which have been taking place. This article provides a detailed analysis of the three-language formula, which is at the center of conflict between the union government and the state government of Tamil Nadu. In fact, there is a much wider debate on this issue, where it has been projected to be a sort of a conflict between the South Indian languages and the Hindi language from the north, which allegedly is being imposed on South Indian states. In fact, we even carried out a detailed podcast on the very same topic. Many of you might have seen those videos. If you haven't, do find the podcast video on our channel. On the home page itself, it should be available. That will give you a lot of insight regarding the language wars which has engulfed our polity and our society. Now, this topic requires a detailed analysis, especially the recent controversy which has erupted between the central government and the government of Tamil Nadu. I'm sure many of you would be aware of the standoff between the Chief Minister of Tamil Nadu, M.K. Stalin, and Union Minister Dharmendra Pradhan. So this has again brought back this topic, this issue into limelight. So let's dive a little deep into this topic and understand the three-language formula. Where does it originate from? What is the mandate of the three-language policy, which is supposed to be taught in our schools, in our government schools, especially at the elementary level? So let's take an unbiased, neutral approach towards this issue. Some of you might assume that I am from South India, that I might be biased towards South Indian languages. But let's look at both sides of the argument, then see what is the right way forward for India. Because don't forget, India is a diverse country with multiple religions, castes, and various other social divides, and language happens to be one of the core identities of Indians across the country. This is a country where not one language is spoken, where hundreds of languages are spoken in different nooks and corners of the country. It is this diversity that makes India a strong, vibrant society. Now, if you look at the issue of language, not just in India, but in any part of the world, in any society, language is always a very emotive subject. It's very closely linked with our emotions. Because language is at the core of your identity, your cultural identity. Especially for those who are in minority, those who belong to certain regions, or those who belong to certain ethnic groups, certain tribal communities. For them, their language, their linguistic heritage is their entire cultural identity. So it's natural for those who are in minority, who speak the minority language, to resist any kind of outside interference or imposition with regard to another language. But those who argue for Hindi to be imposed and promoted, rather, Hindi to be promoted as a link language, not only for official purposes, but as well as for day-to-day life, they have an argument that a country needs a unifying language. A country needs a native language to be promoted, and we need not rely on alien languages like English, which was enforced on India by the colonial power. So India's belief in English being the primary link language, in a way, has been a sort of colonial imposition and a sort of colonial hangover that has been left behind. But today, the circumstances are very different. Is English really imposed on India? Is there an attempt to impose Hindi on the rest of the population? Why do non-Hindi speaking states, particularly from south of India, why do they resist the promotion of Hindi? Why do they see this as an imposition? So let's look at this. Let's understand this in slight detail. But first, we should understand what is the problem. What is the new controversy that has broken out between the government of Tamil Nadu and the central government? Chief Minister M.K. Stalin has alleged that the central government, which is under the BJP, the ruling party, allegedly is discriminating against the state government of Tamil Nadu by not releasing funds under Samagra Shiksha Abhiyan, by making it a condition to impose three-language formula in elementary education. This is what the Tamil Nadu government is alleging. Because see, new education policy 2020, NEP 2020, and as well as the NEP of 1968, which introduced the three-language formula, they seek to promote the introduction of three languages at the elementary level, which of course includes Hindi, then the regional language, which could be the mother tongue of the student, and of course English. So this is generally what you see in certain states where a three-language formula is followed, including in government schools, not just in private schools. Private schools across the country generally offer the three-language formula as per the new education policy. But even in government schools in some states, there is a three-language formula where the first language would be the language of the state, of that region, usually the mother tongue of the students. Second would usually be English, and third would be Hindi, which is seen as a link language. But some states like Tamil Nadu have resisted the three-language formula for many decades. Tamil Nadu never implemented the three-language formula. It continues with the two-language formula, stating that Tamil, which is the mother tongue, should be a priority, of course, and along with that, English as a link language, which is sufficient. So Tamil Nadu has always resisted and rejected the idea of a three-language formula. But now the central government allegedly is making it a condition that if you don't implement the three-language formula, funds will not be released under Samagra Shiksha Abhiyan, which could affect the educational initiatives of the government of Tamil Nadu. So Chief Minister M.K. Stalin has alleged that the center is basically blackmailing the state government, using government schemes and government funding as a smoke screen for Hindi imposition, which is like a majoritarian imposition on a minority language. So this is the allegation coming from Tamil Nadu, and the center denies this, and the center believes that Hindi should be promoted as a link language. Now, in the light of this controversy, let's look at the constitutional provisions. Let's see what the Constitution of India says with regard to language. Do we have any laws with regard to official languages? And are there any rules with regard to languages which are taught at the school level? Let's understand this. Now, before I start, let me issue a clarification, because I've seen many students, they have a wrong assumption that Hindi is the national language of India. Please understand, there is nothing called the national language of India. Constitutionally, there is no national language. There is no law which states that a particular language is the national language of India. So there is no national language. There is nothing called the national language of the country. However, we do have official languages. Official languages recognized under the Constitution of India, where Hindi is seen as the official language. Of course, all the 8 scheduled languages, the 22 scheduled languages, they're all official languages of the state. But however, Hindi along with English have been recognized as official languages for the purposes of the transaction of business, for the conduct of government business. So be it drafting bills, notifying government rules, or issuing a government gazette order, they are issued either in Hindi or English as far as the union government is concerned. And the Constitution provides for Hindi as an official language along with English. But however, our founding fathers who drafted the Constitution of India, they envisaged English as an official link language only for 15 years from the commencement of the Constitution, that is until 1965. But in the 1960s, the same language issue became extremely controversial, even leading to large-scale violence and riots, especially in Tamil Nadu. In 1963, the Official Languages Act was introduced, which provided for the continued usage of English for official purposes along with Hindi, with no time limit. So constitutionally and legally speaking, both English and Hindi have been seen as link languages for official purposes, of course, and in general for educational purposes and for social communication between different linguistic groups. But however, any attempt to enforce Hindi as the solitary link language has seen strong resistance, not just from Tamil Nadu, but from across India. In most of the non-Hindi speaking belt, there has always been a strong resistance against the alleged imposition of Hindi. Now, the Constitution also says that the union government has a duty to promote the spread of Hindi, so that we have a native language which can be seen as a common link language that would allow Indians to communicate. Since we are a very diverse country with hundreds of languages, eventually we do need a link language. There's no doubt about it. Instead of just accepting the Western influence and still being under the colonial hangover, the Constitution makers envisaged official link language as Hindi, asking the union government to promote the spread of Hindi as well, while limiting the application of English for 15 years from the commencement of Constitution. But however, with the Official Languages Act of 1963, usage of English was continued and extended with no time limit, along with Hindi being used as the official language. Now the question is, on what basis can Hindi be seen as a national link language? Or should it even be considered as a link language? Is there a need to even have a link language? According to 2011 census data, close to 44% of our country's population, to be precise, 43.63% of India's population cited Hindi as their mother tongue. Now, if I look at the numbers, this translates roughly to 52 crore people. Of course, these numbers would have increased as well, because trends indicate that the number of Hindi speakers who consider Hindi as their mother tongue has grown over the last few decades. In fact, in the last 40-50 years, the number of Hindi speakers who considered Hindi as their mother tongue has increased quite significantly. So if this was the data in 2011, definitely the numbers would have further increased in the last 14-15 years. So let's say 44 to 45% of the country speaks Hindi. that is around 52 crore people. Let's say numbers has increased slightly, but in a country with a population of nearly 150 crore people, even though Hindi is still the largest spoken language, it still can't be imposed on others. As I said, language is the identity of several regions and communities. Any kind of outside imposition is always a recipe for disaster. We have seen this happening in many other countries as well, where a majoritarian trend, a homogeneous trend is being pushed for political reasons primarily. And this has always backfired, resulting even in civil wars and conflicts in many other countries. And there are numerous examples of that. That's why our constitution makers were very clear that there should not be any imposition, there should not be any national language, there should be no attempt to create any kind of homogeneous linguistic culture. Rather, we should praise and appreciate the diversity we have while finding a common link language which is necessary for official communication and for social transaction as well. Now, the fact of the matter is, English has become a necessity. You can't deny the fact that India's proficiency in English is what has enabled our global rise as well. Especially if you look at our education sector, the medical industry, services industry, even manufacturing to a large extent. India's proficiency in English is what has played a critical role, which makes our youth job ready, not just in the Indian market, but in the global market. So ground reality has largely changed, where English has almost become indispensable in today's economy, particularly within the Indian economy. Now, others might argue, countries like South Korea, Japan, Russia and others, haven't they prospered without relying on English? Yes, they have, correct. But the fact with India is that English has been widely accepted, adopted. It has become the mode of communication as well for a large section of the population. Yes, it has been colonially imposed, but the ground reality is that without proficiency in English, today it becomes almost impossible to get a decent job. Now, what should we do? Should we push our children to learn 2 languages, 3 languages or 4 languages? Is it practical? Does it affect their learning outcomes? Do we have any studies, any data regarding this as to how many languages should be taught at the school level? And ideally, which language should be taught? Should it be the mother tongue, or it should be the link language? Should it be English? So let's understand this with further arguments and points being presented in this article. Now, what is this 3-language policy? What is its origin? The 3-language formula was brought out in the NEP of 1968. As I told you, in 1965, usage of English as the official language was supposed to end. That's what the constitution provided for. But this development in the 1960s, the language debate which erupted, that whether Hindi should be the sole link language for official purposes, or should Hindi be even declared as a national language, the very same debate that happened in the 1960s led to large-scale violence, riots and protests, especially in Tamil Nadu. This brought a lot of pressure on the central government as well, and the Official Languages Act 1963 was introduced, based on which the new education policy of 1968 was brought out, along with the Official Language Resolution of 1968. Now, the NEP provided for the 3-language formula, that Hindi should be taught as one of the languages in non-Hindi speaking states. Let the first language be the regional language of that particular state, which is obviously the mother tongue of the most of the students. Second language would often be English. And as a third language, Hindi would be introduced in non-Hindi speaking states. Now, this would apply not only for private schools, but more importantly for government schools as well. But in some cases, this can be the other way around, where the first language is English. We have seen this especially with private schools, the English medium schools, where first language is always English, with the second language being the regional language, the mother tongue usually of most of the students in the school, and Hindi coming in as a third language. So either ways, the 3-language formula was pushed through the NEP of 1968, though some states adopted this and introduced Hindi as a third language in non-Hindi speaking states. Some states like Tamil Nadu rejected this. Tamil Nadu continued with the 2-language policy. Now let's see what the latest NEP says with regard to the 3-language formula, the new education policy of 2020. The NEP promotes three-language formula. It retains the three-language policy for elementary education, for basic primary education. But however, it does not impose three-language formula. The NEP states that there should not be any imposition, be it Hindi or any language, there should not be any imposition on the state. Languages should be learnt with regard to the choice of the students, the state government and the regional circumstances. So NEP actually provides a lot of flexibility for state governments to determine the curriculum and the languages which are to be taught at the school level. It gives freedom and autonomy not only to the state governments but even to the students to choose which language they would like to learn. But of course, there's one condition, that out of three languages, at least two of them should be native to India, which is a very fair expectation. Let there be three languages at the elementary level. Let the states decide the order and which of these languages would be taught. Let the students have a choice as well. Let regional circumstances and the economic necessity define which language a student would like to learn. Now, what will I do by learning Hindi as first language and my regional language as a second language and keeping English as a third language, which might make me unfit for a job in the future where English proficiency might be a necessity? So depending on each student's circumstances, the regional circumstances, the economic necessity and a flexibility given to the state government, let states decide and students opt for different languages. That's what NEP provides for. It provides for a very flexible arrangement, but it does support the three-language formula and it mandates that two of these languages, 2 out of 3, should be native languages of India, which is to protect the native languages, the regional languages of the country. Now, this is a very fair approach of the NEP. But however, now if you look at the three-language formula and its implementation, there are certain practical challenges. See, when you're discussing this as a policy, when you're just contemplating this as a policy, it seems like a perfect approach. But it may not translate into actual practical outcomes because our experience with three-language formula has been mixed. Studies have shown that three-language formula has unnecessarily burdened our students at the elementary level. This is a counter argument. Why are we expecting our children in elementary level to learn three languages, which could be an unnecessary burden on them? Yes, India in general is a multilingual country. Most people can speak 2 languages or 3 languages. But should it be enforced from the primary level? That is the big question. How does this affect learning outcomes? Does this have an impact on the ability of a child to learn different skills, different subjects? And studies have shown, yes, it does. Empirical studies have clearly established a direct link between the elementary languages which are taught and the eventual learning outcomes of that child. Not just with regard to linguistic skills, even with regard to aptitude, numeracy, even with regard to learning math and science. Language plays a key role because it's a foundation. It's something that's fundamental to learning. The ASER study, which is a very reputed survey with regard to the field of education in the country, which is published by a popular NGO known as Pratham. It brings out the annual status of education research. If you look at the findings of the ASER survey, the findings are alarming. If you look at the learning outcomes of our students in our country, the study has recently found that a class 5 student is not able to read a class 2 textbook. 60% of students in class 5 cannot read a class 2 textbook. They are not able to read fluently in English, neither in the regional language. 25% of the youth in the age group of 14 to 18 years, which comes under secondary education, they are not able to read a class 2 textbook fluently in English. English proficiency has suffered, and it doesn't mean that they are good in regional languages or in Hindi. Even with regard to Hindi or their regional languages, students are struggling. They're not able to read few basic lines from a lower standard textbook. 40% of this age group could not read sentences, complete sentences in English. Forget speaking on their own or writing their own sentences. They can't open the book and read on their own. They can't speak fluently. So linguistic education is something that is very crucial. It's fundamental to the way a child grows and develops, especially how the intellectual abilities of a student develops is largely dependent on language which is imparted, as it is the medium of communication. Studies have always shown that the mother tongue is always a priority, should always be a priority, as learning in one's mother tongue will enable better learning outcomes and learning abilities. On the other hand, economic necessity, global and social necessity requires one to learn English, as English proficiency has become a basic criteria to secure jobs. And studies have also shown that 3-language formula creates a burden on the students. Now, this is where states like Tamil Nadu have a point. They have valid arguments that let our students learn the mother tongue, the regional language, English for the sake of employment, also as a link language, as most Indians can converse in English. Of course, numbers are questionable, but still English can be seen as a viable link language. What's the need to impose another language such as Hindi? The fear of Hindi here in the southern states or in non-Hindi speaking states stems from the fact that in many North Indian states where Hindi has spread in the last 40-50 years, I told you at the beginning, right, that Hindi speakers have grown. These are the regions where native languages have been wiped out. From Bihar to Punjab to Madhya Pradesh to Gujarat, where you find a large number of Hindi speakers who cite Hindi as their mother tongue. If you look at the local native languages, the smaller languages which existed, many of them have been eliminated, almost pushed towards extinction, as Hindi has taken over the smaller languages that were spoken in this belt, in the northern belt as well as in parts of northwest and northeastern India. Now, this is the argument of the non-Hindi speaking states in eastern India, northeastern India, southern India, that Hindi imposition could come at the cost of the native local languages. It would not only affect the learning outcomes, it could affect the culture as well, it could affect the native traditions, it could affect the identity of the people as well. So governments like Tamil Nadu have argued that 2 languages are enough. One is the regional language, which is usually the mother tongue of the majority of the students, and a link language for largely for economic reasons, for practical reasons, which is English. So they don't see the need to teach Hindi as even a third language. Because again, studies have shown that when Hindi or any language is taught as a third language, students neither develop any proficiency in it, nor is it of any use for them in the future. Even if they learn Hindi as a third language, you go and speak to any student who have gone through the 3-language curriculum. Many of them have no proficiency in the third language. Though they would have studied Hindi as a third language, they can't really read and write and speak fluently, and at the same time, it's of no practical use for them in the coming days. Then what is the point of teaching a third language and burdening the students at the threat of eradicating the local language? So this is the argument of Tamil Nadu. Of course, it's a debatable topic, right? There is a very strong counter argument to this as well, that in the place of English, shouldn't we look at the long term? Shouldn't we promote our native languages, and shouldn't we have a native Indian language as the link language, not just as official language? Why should we rely on a Western imposed language that is English, which is a fair argument as well? But this hits at the very root of one's identity. And it's also about learning outcomes, the impact on education. How does it affect a child? Because studies have shown that poor linguistic skills will affect one's skills in numeracy, aptitude, and science and maths as well. There is a connection that exists. Now, if you look at how much we are spending on education, because this is about resources as well. If 3 languages have to be taught at schools, especially in government schools, don't you think government schools need teachers? Don't you think they need adequate resources to implement the third language? Now, this is where a problem exists. If you look at the expenditure on education, our total expenditure is 4 to 4.5% of the GDP. If you take the total money spent by the central government, the state governments, because states are incurring most of the expenditure, right? According to data from 2019-2020, just on elementary education, almost 3 lakh crores was spent from the governments. 15% came from central government, 85% came from state governments. So states clearly incur more expenditure when it comes to elementary education. Now, if I take this cumulatively, expenditure incurred by the state governments and central government, not just on elementary, even on primary, secondary and higher and technical education, expenditure even from the private sector. And if I take the cumulative expenditure, it stands at 4 to 4.5% of the GDP. NEP 2020 mandates that our total expenditure on education should be 6% of the GDP. So we are still below the target, which means we don't have adequate financial resources. States are struggling for finances with regard to education. Now, how will states implement three-language formula if they are not able to finance and provide the resources required? Government schools will need additional teachers. Teachers need adequate training. They themselves should be capable enough to teach the third language to make it a effective mode of communication. Arranging those resources requires investments, requires expenditure. And right now, what we are investing in education is not sufficient. So should we waste our limited resources on three languages, or should we keep some of the resources for numeracy skills, maths and science while promoting two languages? Which is the better option? So as I said, it's a highly debatable, controversial topic. There can be arguments both for and against. Now you let me know what you think in the comment section. Should we have the three-language formula? Let me know your experience, because some of you would have studied with two-language formula. Some of you would have studied with three-language formula. Let me know in the comments, do you really have proficiency in your third language? Has your third language really helped you in your life, in getting a job or in general in the society? Does it serve any practical purpose? Should you have Hindi as a link language, or should non-Hindi speaking states accept Hindi because it is indeed spoken by a large percentage of our population? Because see, if I consider 2011 census data, and if you look at the numbers with regard to how many people can converse in Hindi, understand and speak in Hindi, the number is clearly above 50%. Almost 43.63% said Hindi is their mother tongue, right? There will be a number of people who can understand and speak Hindi, even though Hindi is not their mother tongue. For example, there could be a Bengali, there could be a Gujarati, a Punjabi or a Kannadiga who can understand Hindi, speak Hindi as well, though it's not their mother tongue. So this cumulative number comes up to 55%. 55% of country's population can indeed converse, at least understand and even have some basic conversation in Hindi. Then there is a sound argument there as well, that Hindi can be a link language. So let me know what you think about this. Now, what should be the way forward? Let's say UPSC brings out a question on this, specifically on three-language formula, and does it serve a valid purpose? With regard to elementary education, what is the impact of three-language versus two-language formula? See, English is definitely not our native language. There's no doubt about it. So here, Hindi gets a plus point, being a native language spoken by the majority. But is this a reason enough to push Hindi as a language when it's not being received and accepted by a large section of the country? Because any kind of majoritarian imposition on linguistic grounds is a recipe for disaster. Understood? While English has been well adapted to the Indian context, see, in today's times, English is not really imposed as such. Yes, it has been a colonial hangover, it has been a Western imposition. But today, English has become very essential, right? Nobody can deny the fact that English proficiency is not necessary. It is absolutely necessary in today's world. At least for countries like India, it has become necessary. You can't change that overnight. Now, you need to focus on learning outcomes as well. You need to ensure that we prepare our youth for the future of the economy, not just the Indian economy, but the global economy. We need to keep in mind the limited resources we have, the constraints that we have in our education system. Private schools may afford a third teacher to teach a third language, but government schools may not be able to do that. Instead, shouldn't government schools focus on numeracy, math and science instead of blindly focusing on three languages? Shouldn't the same resources be used, which is limited first of all, shouldn't it be used to focus on other subjects as well instead of just focusing blindly on languages? Studies have clearly shown, as I said, that the third language has not been efficient. Though it has been taught, it has been only for the sake of it. Students have learned a third language, but it really had no impact. Neither they can read or converse or speak fluently. So then what's the point? You're wasting the time and resources. Yes, a large part of the country is trilingual, bilingual. If you look at urban areas and rural areas, and if you account for migration, right? These numbers are very crucial. In urban areas, you find more people who are bilingual and trilingual. That's because of migration, where people from different states, different regions would have migrated. And you see that they will adapt to the local conditions, learn the local language, and they become bilingual or trilingual. This is quite common in many parts of the country. Now, when this occurs organically, when it's happening naturally, that's different altogether. But if it appears to be imposed from the state, if let's say government is holding welfare schemes and using that to blackmail state governments to push a language, to push the 3-language formula, then it acquires a completely different picture altogether. That's where the allegation comes up that Hindi is being forced, Hindi is being imposed. So this is what the article says, that center should stop pushing states against their wish. States need to have more autonomy, more flexibility with regard to education, especially when it comes to choosing languages. 2-language formula has served many states very well, states like Tamil Nadu. At the same time, 3-language formula has worked well for some states. In Karnataka, for example, where 3-language formula was seen, it has served very well. There are other states as well where 3-language formula has worked. In Maharashtra, it has seen better results. So let the states decide. Why should center push this, or why should center use welfare schemes and government schemes to almost blackmail state governments? If the allegation of MK Stalin is true, that center is withholding funds just because 3-language formula is not implemented, then the editorial says that center should not be imposing this. Let the states decide, let the autonomy be given to the states, and let states decide depending on the regional circumstances. So let me know what you think about this, and please take up this question for your answer writing practice. Write a detailed note on the 3-language policy. What did it mandate? What are the challenges in having extra language courses in government schools? So this is not just about linguistic identity and linguistic conflicts. This is more about the practicality, right? The focus of the article here is not whether Hindi is great or Tamil is great or other languages are great. That's not the debate at all. The debate here is it practical to push 3 languages, or should we just focus on 2 languages? How does it affect education, especially elementary education? So let me know what you think and write an answer for this question. Be prepared for this topic because it has been a pressing issue from many years. Now let's look at this important editorial relevant for polity and internal security. Internet shutdowns in India. India has become infamous as the internet shutdown capital of the world. Critics argue that if at all there was an internet shutdown index at the global level, India would be leading that index. Now, this is not a very good tag or a image or a reputation for India. India being a constitutional democracy where freedom of speech and expression is a guaranteed fundamental right under Article 19. To see such frequent disruption of internet services on security grounds, on law and order grounds, is quite disturbing. This again is a debatable topic, so let's take a look at this. See, recent studies have shown that India ranks number 2 in 2024 as far as the total number of internet shutdowns are concerned. We share this spot besides Myanmar, Pakistan, and other such autocratic dictatorial regimes, including Russia. Now, definitely the top 4 or 5 countries shows shows that this is not a position a country should aspire for, right? If Myanmar, Pakistan, and others like Bangladesh, etc. are there in that list, in the top list, definitely it's not a position a country like India should be aspiring for. We are at the 2nd position, however, unfortunately. Last year in 2024, India saw 84 internet shutdowns, just one less than Myanmar. Now, the only positive here is that compared to 2023 and the years before that, the number of internet shutdowns has reduced slightly in 2024. I'll repeat this point. In 2024, the number of internet shutdowns in India slightly declined compared to 2023 and before. Because from 2020 to 2023, India saw many internet shutdowns. In some years, in 2020 especially, number of internet shutdowns went above 100. Now it has slightly reduced to 84. But again, it's nothing great. It's not an achievement because we are sharing this position besides countries like Myanmar and Pakistan, and we are still the second country when it comes to the most number of internet shutdowns in the world. Now let's debate this topic quickly. Let's understand on what grounds is India shutting down internet? What grounds of security and law and order internet is being suspended? What is its impact? What is the process of shutting down internet? Are there any checks and balances? Because a shutdown of internet essentially will cripple your freedom of speech and expression. Right? It has an economic impact, it has a social impact, a political impact. Is the government accounting for these consequences while shutting down internet? Because of course, Article 19 is not absolute. You might argue that Article 19 is not an absolute fundamental right. There are reasonable restrictions. If there is a threat to the sovereignty, integrity of the nation, if there is a threat to public order, morality, decency, then definitely Article 19 can be curbed, which means internet can also be curbed. Especially when riots have broken out, large-scale violence has broken out, which is threatening law and order and the security of the state. Obviously, authorities should have the right to suspend communication and internet. Now, how do you balance these two conflicting objectives? That is what we need to learn. Now, please look at this data that the Hindu is presenting in a different article on page number 9. There is a related infographic that the Hindu shares on page number 9, and I find this to be very insightful. Look at the first chart over here. One of the prime reasons why India has shut down internet is because of communal violence. Now, this is quite alarming. Largely because of communal incidents, communal grounds, India suspending internet, it doesn't really paint a good picture for India. Yes, India has communal divisions. Communal riots can easily spill out of control because during such law and order problems, disinformation, fake news can be deadly. It's like adding fuel to the fire. It's essential to curb the spread of disinformation, misinformation, and fake news, which requires certain curbs on communication networks. But should it need or should it be a complete suspension of mobile and internet services? That is a big question. The other ground on which internet has been suspended is due to protests. Protests conducted by different groups. Now, isn't right to protest a fundamental right as well? But since some protests can lead to violence, or at least there is a suspicion amongst the police, the authorities, that protests could lead to law and order problem, they preemptively suspend internet and communication. Now, where are we seeing such shutdowns happening? In which parts of India? In the last couple of years, it's primarily Manipur, obviously because of the given security situation. The large-scale ethnic violence between Meiteis and Kukis and the volatile security situation has led to massive internet shutdowns in Manipur. In Jammu and Kashmir as well, historically we have seen many such shutdown of communication networks. In Punjab, primarily in the conflict zones of India, where there is a threat to security of the state, a threat to the sovereignty of the nation, a threat to public order. Even in states like Rajasthan, Haryana, Maharashtra, we have seen plenty of internet shutdowns happening again and again. So in some instances, maybe the shutdown of internet services was necessary. It was seen as essential. For example, when Punjab police made a failed attempt to capture Amritpal Singh, the self-styled Khalistani leader, internet and mobile services were suspended in Punjab for several days across the state. And it was seen as necessary on security grounds to prevent the spread of fake news, which could have incited Khalistani sentiments. But we've also seen several instances where even a small riot or a protest or a minor disruption to law and order results in a heavy-handed reaction from the government, from the police, where they order the service providers to shut down mobile and internet services. This has become the go-to response, which should have been it should have essentially been an exceptional response used only in exceptional circumstances. It has become a go-to preferred response of the government. Whenever there is a slightest trouble, usually the first step of the police is to suspend mobile and internet services. Now that is disturbing. Now look at this chart. It gives you the different reasons for which internet has been suspended. Believe it or not, in India, internet has been suspended many times to prevent cheating in exams. You know which states I'm talking about. In some states where cheating happens at a mass level, where it is enabled by a huge nexus to prevent such large-scale cheating in exams, internet mobile services are suspended. Now, is it valid? Again, it's debatable. For elections, for the conduct of elections, for controlling information, that is basically to tackle the spread of fake news, even during important anniversaries or festivals. For example, the anniversary of the anti-Sikh riots, anniversary of Babri Masjid demolition, the Hindu-Muslim riots, the Godhra incident and the Godhra riots that followed. On these important anniversary events, internet mobile is suspended in some parts of the country, usually on communal grounds. And of course, in conflict zones where political crisis has broken out. Now, in all these instances, let's say last year itself, 84 times India shut down the internet in different parts of the country. If you evaluate, was it valid? Was it necessary? Was it really required? You actually find that in many of the cases, it was not necessary. And the duration also matters. For how many days, for how many hours are you suspending internet services? Because see, eventually, internet shutdown has a wider impact. Please understand, yes, police and security agencies might feel that curbing information flow is essential during riots and protests. We are not denying that. It is a required response, especially when large-scale violence has broken out, or when a major conflict has erupted, or when violent protests have broken out. It is essential to curb the spread of fake news and wrong information. As I said, suspension of communication services is necessary sometimes, but it should be exceptional. Now, what are the grounds? Who defines these grounds? That's not defined clearly. Now, if you look at the total shutdowns that happened last year, out of the 84 shutdowns, 41 shutdowns were because of protests. Now, was it really necessary to suspend internet in case of all these protests? Absolutely no. Though it was necessary in some cases, for example, in Manipur, when situation was very volatile, when Meitei groups and Kuki groups had called for protests, suspending internet was necessary to curb the flow of wrong information. But in many cases, like in Haryana, internet was suspended just because farmers were protesting. Though there was no reasonable evidence to show that it could lead to any breakout of violence, suspension of internet became the norm for police and security agencies. Similarly, on communal grounds or for cheating in exams, suspending internet doesn't make any sense. So here we have a very important Supreme Court judgment in the Anuradha Basin case. In 2020, the Supreme Court laid down certain guidelines with regard to suspension of internet. Supreme Court agreed with the government that internet suspension of communication services is necessary sometimes because reasonable restrictions apply on free speech and expression. But considering its economic impact, because suspension of internet will disrupt livelihoods, it will disrupt the economy. Many livelihoods are dependent on mobile and internet services. You're going to disrupt their livelihood. This will have a long-lasting political, social and economic impact. Now, the Supreme Court asked the government, are you considering these consequences? Are you just blindly suspending internet as a go-to response? Or is there a process that you're following? Are you evaluating the impact? So based on this, the government's response was not satisfactory. The Supreme Court laid down that in the Anuradha Basin case, it laid down that the government can suspend internet only when it matches or meets the test of necessity and proportionality. Suspension of internet should be seen as necessary, as a last resort, that without that violence might spread further. Only when you reach such a state, such a situation, should you take that last resort. It's an extreme step which can't be used just for the sake of it. And it should be proportional to the threat, depending on the threat. Let's say the threat is in one district. Suspend communication only in that district instead of suspending it across the state. The duration has to be specified. It can't be indefinite, as we have seen in Manipur and Jammu and Kashmir. Many students who have written to us, they have told how education got disrupted for months because mobile internet was not available. Right? If you're watching, please let us know in the comments if that was the case. So it can't be for an indefinite period. It has to be proportional. Let's say threat is for a couple of days. Maybe for 2 to 3 days it can be suspended, but it should be restored as soon as possible. Maybe when the orders for suspension is given, the government should also put a date that on this date the suspension will end, that normalcy will be restored back. But usually we don't see that happening. For indefinite periods, mobile internet services are suspended. This denies access to education, healthcare, livelihood. It affects patients from accessing healthcare facilities. It affects education, learning. So understanding the impact, using it in a limited manner is essential. It's an extraordinary power. Nobody is debating its constitutionality. It is constitutional. Government has the authority as an emergency measure to suspend communication and mobile services on security grounds. Nobody is denying that. But how you apply that, the process you're following is very important. In fact, the 84 times that internet was shut down last year, did you know that not even in one instance did the government upload the order on any website detailing the causes, the need or the duration? The government is not transparent. Government officials are taking the decisions, writing to the service providers, ordering them to suspend mobile internet services without informing the public. No public information is given, no transparency is maintained. Of course, there is a legal ground on which suspension can be ordered. But as per the Telecommunication Temporary Suspension of Services Rules 2024, it is mandatory to publicly place that order. List it on the website as well. On what grounds are you suspending the internet? For how many days? What's the duration? This has to be spelled out so that there is accountability. This is an extreme step which should be used sparingly. It can't be the go-to response for every security incident. That is what we learned from this important editorial, that India should not aspire to be the internet shutdown capital of the world. Ideally, a country should have zero internet disruption. If you look at certain countries, developed countries, they have absolutely zero internet shutdowns. Maybe India can't get there given our social security problems. You need to look at the practicality of it as well. As I said, curbing fake news, misinformation is very essential during a security crisis. But it can't be a blanket provision which gets misused on political grounds, or it can't just be a blanket provision for security forces. It can't be a lazy way out for the security forces to deal with the security crisis. There should be more transparency, more accountability, and a limited usage of this extreme measure. As Supreme Court pointed out in the Anuradha Basin case, it should meet the test of necessity and proportionality. Shutdown of internet should be seen as absolutely necessary, and it should be proportional. That is what we learn from this important editorial. Let's look at another editorial which is equally interesting, that deals with man-animal conflict. It's a small topic, so we can go through this quickly. I want you guys to understand rising incidents of man-animal conflict in our country. How does it affect not only our environment and biodiversity, but it affects local communities as well. Especially in states like Kerala, we have seen increasing incidents of man-animal conflict in recent times. Many of you might recollect the recent incident where a temple elephant went on a rampage, leading to several injuries and deaths. We saw another recent incident where a wild elephant caused many injuries and deaths. Then we saw a tiger attack as well in Wayanad region, where lives were lost and eventually the animal also was killed. So now this is taking an impact both on the people as well as on the wildlife. Now, why are these man-animal conflict incidents rising, especially in a state like Kerala? It's not a Kerala specific problem. It's a countrywide problem, a global problem as well today. What are the reasons responsible for rising incidents of man-animal conflict? How can we manage the interaction between man and wildlife? That is what we need to learn here. See, in a state like Kerala, almost 29% of the state is forested. Obviously, it has a rich wildlife and biodiversity. And if you destroy the forests, if you destroy the native habitat of these animals, obviously it will result in conflict incidents. If you clear forest land for large projects without restrictions, if you blindly promote urbanization, exploitative tourism, and large-scale deforestation, what do you expect to happen? You are venturing into the territory of the animals, taking away their habitat, their home, right? Setting up habitations on the forest fringes, allowing industries to flourish on forest fringes, promoting unsustainable agricultural practices, which further contributes to the impact on the habitat. Naturally, this will lead to habitat fragmentation. It affects the wild animals. They run out of food. They don't find enough food and prey in the core habitats, pushing them to venture out towards human habitations. So there is a clear anthropogenic factor involved here. You can't blindly blame the animals, the innocent mute animals. The blame lies with humans and our mindless, unsustainable development. And that is the prime reason responsible here, nothing else. But of course, we need to learn how to manage this. Because see, in Kerala, there have been some extreme suggestions. A few farmers associations, because farmers are primarily affected because of such incidents. whenever an elephant or a tiger carries out such attacks, right? Elephants can destroy crops or kill local farmers, or tigers can definitely cause significant damage as well. So there is some anger amongst the local community. So farmer associations are calling for culling the wild animals. There are few radical extreme church associations as well, right, who are calling for culling some of the wildlife because they say that wildlife population has exploded. But that is not the root problem here. Problem is not the rising wildlife population. That's never the problem. Problem is the reducing habitat. The habitat for the wildlife has been destroyed. It's been fragmented. It's been eroded. And that is the issue that needs to be addressed. And data from Kerala itself shows that incidents of man-animal-wildlife conflict has gone down, and especially fatal incidents has reduced significantly. If you look at the data, wildlife related incidents, especially elephant linked incidents and deaths, has gone down by almost 7%. Snake bites, which accounts for one of the highest numbers of man-animal conflict deaths, has also gone down in Kerala because the state has taken better steps and better measures. So culling the wildlife is never the solution. Wildlife is not the problem, man is the problem here. We need to regulate our own development, ensure that we protect these habitats, maintain certain boundaries between man and wildlife. That is what is essential, what is necessary. Now, if you look at Kerala, for example, habitat fragmentation has been one of the root causes for rising man-animal conflict incidents. Though we have seen a decline in the number of injuries and deaths, the incidents keep occurring every now and then because the habitat itself has been broken and fragmented. You have highways and railway lines running through forest areas. You have these linear projects like power grids and telephone lines running through core habitat areas. Then you have human habitations which are expanding, especially where agriculture keeps shifting, right? Farmers keep on deforesting the forest areas to expand their agricultural land. You often find that in tribal belts, or you find industries and urban centers expanding mindlessly, or exploitative tourism, which contributes to deforestation and habitat fragmentation. This is the root cause. When habitat gets broken and fragmented, that's where animals find that their movement has been restricted. Many animals are migratory in nature. Take elephants, for example. Tigers, especially the bigger mammals, they migrate over large distances. They migrate from one protected area to another. Now, if you break the habitat in between through human development because of these anthropogenic factors, obviously the animals are going to venture out because that is their natural migratory route. Now, look at the elephant corridors, the migratory corridors in Kerala, the Aralam farm. Make a note of this. UPSC might ask prelims questions here. It has previously asked such questions. So please note down the elephant corridors. The Aralam farm in Kannur district, the Chinnakanal elephant corridor in Idukki. At these important elephant corridors, which are crucial for migration of elephants, large-scale human development is responsible for increasing man-animal conflict incidents. Now, how can you blame the animals for that? You can't say elephant population has increased, that's the reason and you should cull the elephants. That's never the right response. It's we humans who have contributed to destruction of the habitat and fragmentation of the habitat, destroyed the natural migratory corridors. Along with that, we have unregulated tourism, large-scale cattle grazing which has gone up from local communities, encroachment, especially by local communities on forest land, dumping of food waste. Now, this attracts animals. The moment you start dumping food, or even when tourists start feeding animals, right, it changes their dietary behavior and patterns. It attracts them towards human habitations. You might have seen whenever you go to a protected area, tiger reserve for example, you see boards that don't feed the animals. The board is put up for a reason, right? Any easy availability of food will change the dietary patterns of the animals, dragging them, pushing them towards human habitations. They think easy food is available here. Then you have invasive plants and monoculture agricultural practices, where forest area has been decimated and diverse crops have been abandoned to promote monoculture. For example, growing eucalyptus because it has more industrial commercial value, or acacia plants. So just one type of farming driven by industrial commercial motivations will destroy the feed that is available for the herbivores in the forests. So if enough plant material, vegetation is not available for the animals to consume, so animals like elephants, deers, etc., they will venture out to find food. Monoculture has been one of the root causes, invasive plants as well. which have taken over the native species, the alien invasive species of plants, which have eroded the native vegetation, has reduced the plant cover, the food material available for the herbivores, pushing them towards the outer edges of the forest, even into human habitations. This will drag the predators as well behind them. So the only way in which you can address this is by trying to solve this locally. You need local solutions. See, Kerala has already declared man-animal conflict as a state-specific disaster. This allows the disaster management authority at the state level to play a bigger role, and the state government is also involving local participation. Because see, what is alarming is that tribal communities, historically, they are very adept at living with wildlife, cohabiting with wildlife. It's something that need not be taught to them. It comes naturally to them. But today you find a disturbing trend where many tribal communities have lost that skill. Traditionally, forest-dwelling tribes, they had a symbiotic relationship with the forest and the wildlife. They knew how much to take from the forest, how to protect the forest, how to stay away from wild animals and avoid man-animal conflict incidents. This was traditional knowledge present in our tribal communities. And today we are seeing a decline of that traditional knowledge. The local tribal communities are not aware as to how to deal with man-animal conflict incidents. Traditionally, there were many practices followed by tribes. They would leave enough for the wild animals while taking only what was needed for them. They would treat the forest with respect. They would even take up few basic measures like digging some trenches around their village to prevent the entry of wild animals, or putting up fires to distract and scare the animals away. This is part of traditional knowledge which many local communities have lost. So it's important to revive the traditional knowledge. Empower our local communities, our tribal communities. The government should be more proactive in this regard. First, of course, you need to prevent habitat fragmentation. Conserve your forests, conserve the core habitats. Not just the protected areas, even the corridors, the migratory corridors have to be preserved and protected. Local communities have to play a role in this. To tackle with deforestation, tackle with mindless industrialization, urbanization and unsustainable agricultural practices, which is harming the forest land. Then ensure that exploitative tourism is curbed. Promote only regulated tourism, ecotourism, while keeping a check on unregulated tourism. These steps are essential. Spread awareness amongst the people. And if, let's say, if at all there is an incident, compensate the people who have been affected. The government should step in immediately. Those who are injured and killed, they and their family should receive immediate compensation so that they don't hold any anger against the animals. Usually what happens is that local communities take revenge on those animals. So to avoid that, the state has to intervene, provide compensation on time, spread awareness, make them involved with environmental activists, volunteers and the forest department to ensure that we contain and prevent such incidents. So building elephant trenches or elephant walls or solar fencing, they are quite effective to protect human habitations. So such measures, physical structural measures, have to be scaled up along with sustainable conservation measures. Now let's look at another important article on page 10 that deals with the issue of arrest of women. What are the grounds, the legal provisions present in our country when it comes to arresting a woman accused? What restrictions are present on the police force when it comes to arresting an accused if the accused is a woman? There are few restrictions here. From sunset to sunrise, which basically means from 6 p.m. to 6 a.m. a woman cannot be arrested by the police. But however, please note, it's not mandatory. It's not a mandatory directive. It is a directive which is present. It's not mandatory. Generally, the police should refrain from arresting a woman, right? Even though if the woman is accused in a major crime, the police should avoid arresting a woman from sunset to sunrise. And if at all the woman has to be arrested under exceptional circumstances, let's say the woman has committed a grave crime or the woman is still posing a threat, endangering lives and society, in such cases arrest will have to be carried out. Obviously, police can't sit and wait till sunrise. Under exceptional circumstances, there are certain rules to be followed, certain processes to be followed. Now, first of all, the question is, why is an exception made for women? What is the legal basis for this? See, this is to ensure the safety of women. As you know, we have seen many incidents of women being abused and exploited even by the police. So to ensure the safety of women, a certain degree of protection was recommended by the Law Commission. The 135th report of the Law Commission of India in 1989 recommended this restriction to be placed on the police and the investigating agencies. This recommendation was reiterated by the 154th Law Commission report in 1996, and eventually section 46 clause 4 was added to CRPC in 2005. The Criminal Procedure Code, which existed until recently, consists of section 46 clause 4, which places this restriction on the police. Now, of course, CRPC has been replaced by BNSS, Bharatiya Nagarik Suraksha Sanhita, which has replaced the CRPC. So this section of CRPC corresponds with section 43 clause 5 of BNSS. The restriction which was previously under section 46 clause 4 of CRPC has now moved to section 43 clause 5 of BNSS. Now you need not remember all these details, the sections are not relevant. Just know that there was a provision in CRPC which has now been followed in Bharatiya Nagarik Suraksha Sanhita as well, that restricts the police from arresting women post sunset and before sunrise. Why was the restriction placed? To ensure the safety of women, to ensure that women are not abused and exploited by the police, which is a likely possibility, to guarantee the safety of women. But however, it's not a mandatory directive, it's just a guideline which has been prescribed. This can be breached by the police in exceptional circumstances, but those exceptional circumstances are not defined. Clear? The law does not define what constitutes these exceptional circumstances. The police, what they have to do is, if they have to arrest a woman accused, right, during night time, there should be a woman police officer present. Ideally, a woman police officer should carry out the arrest. And if a woman police officer is not available, then the male police officer cannot touch the body of the woman. They can arrest and take the accused to the custody, but they can't touch the physical body of the woman. There is a restriction placed on that. Ideally, a woman officer should accompany the team to arrest a woman accused during night time. Now, let's say practically it's not possible. Sometimes, let's say a woman police officer is not available, but there is a dangerous woman accused who is about to commit another major crime, and she poses a threat to the society. She has to be arrested. So obviously, because of this restriction, police can't sit and wait. That's why exceptional circumstances has been given as an exception. Police can arrest women. Don't think there's a complete ban. Many movies and these TV shows and YouTube influencers, they might be misleading you that women can never be arrested. No, there is a restriction, yes, but it's not absolute. There is an exception. Police can arrest women, but there is a certain process to be followed. The police have to get the permission of the local magistrate. And if, let's say, magistrate is also not available, it's not guaranteed that a magistrate is available all the time. In that case, police can go and arrest the woman following the due process by not touching the physical body of the woman, by not abusing the woman in any manner. And they have to submit a written report to their superior and the magistrate the next day. Or if, let's say, magistrate is not available, they need to inform the superior officers, get their permissions as well, then submit a written document to the magistrate to get the approval after the arrest. So this ensures a system of checks and balances to prevent the abuse of the police power, which could lead to the abuse of women. So this issue has recently come up with regard to a case that was handled by the Madurai bench of the Madras High Court. It has ruled that this is just a directive. It's not mandatory. It's not compulsory for the police to follow. So please don't think women cannot be arrested at night. Women can be arrested. Clear? The guideline is that there should be a woman police officer with magistrate permission. But let's say even that is not possible. Sometimes a woman officer may not be available. Magistrate may not be available. So male police officers can go and arrest the woman. There's no prohibition. There's no mandatory prohibition under the law. However, they have to take permission from their superiors and submit a written report to the magistrate later. Clear? Now, what happens if police officers violate this directive? There is no legal penalty as such. There is no legal penalty prescribed through a law. That's why the Supreme Court has said there should be better guidelines. Now, what constitutes these exceptional circumstances is not defined. The Supreme Court has urged the police departments to define these exceptional circumstances. For example, let's say women police officer not being available on duty, magistrate not being available, or a woman accused who has committed a serious crime or who is about to endanger the society with further crimes, where the arrest of the accused cannot be delayed anymore. Those guidelines have to be clearly specified. That is what the writer is arguing for. These exceptional circumstances should be clearly defined and the guidelines should be strictly followed. However, there is no ban as such on arresting women. Women can be arrested at night as well, but these are the exceptions that are provided. Now, coming to the last few articles, we have few small articles in the newspaper. We can go through them quickly, one by one. On page number 12, we have an article related to the Heret Security Dialogue. These few articles give you some important updates regarding key developments that have been taking place. The Heret Security Dialogue is organized in Madrid by former officials and diplomats of Afghanistan who were part of the former Afghan government. I'm sure all of you know today Afghanistan is under the Taliban. The Taliban captured power in 2021 by toppling the then civilian government. So those former officials and diplomats who were serving the former Afghan civilian government, which was an elected government, they have taken exile in other countries. Obviously, if they remained in the country, Taliban would have most likely targeted them. Most of the former Afghan officials, leaders and diplomats, they have fled the country, they are in foreign countries, taken asylum. They have organized the Heret Security Dialogue to discuss the situation in Afghanistan, to talk about the security situation and how the world should keep up pressure on Taliban. So they have urged India to not recognize the Taliban and to not allow Taliban's envoy to be stationed at the Afghan embassy in New Delhi. See, this is a long-standing issue since 2021. Of course, when the Taliban regime took over and the Afghan regime collapsed, India and most countries were faced with the dilemma. Should we recognize the Taliban government or not? Today, most countries have not recognized Taliban. Officially, most countries have not recognized the Taliban regime. Yeah, of course, India has never recognized the Taliban regime in the past as well. In fact, until recently, we never had official talks with Taliban. Now, the big question was what to do with their embassy and their diplomats. Whether the existing embassy would continue, the previous diplomats who were part of the previous government, would they be the representatives of Afghanistan, or will Taliban send new representatives? And should we accept and recognize the Talibani envoys? This was the big question. Some countries which have been more pragmatic, which have tried protecting their interests, they have tried engaging with Taliban. Even though they have not recognized the Taliban government itself, they have maintained relations, accepted Talibani envoys. Countries like Russia, countries like China, Pakistan, even Iran, UAE, Qatar, all the Central Asian countries that border Afghanistan, they've all accepted Talibani envoys, though they don't recognize the Talibani government. Now, India is contemplating this. Recently, we have seen clashes break out as well within the Afghan embassy in Delhi and the Afghan consulate in Mumbai, where a dispute has broken out between former officials as to who gets to represent Afghanistan. Now, India appears to be moving closer to Taliban day by day. We have recently engaged with Taliban officially. We have been talking to Taliban to protect our interests. And it appears that India and Taliban are slowly opening up to each other. Because previously, we had labeled Taliban as a terrorist outfit, given its proximity to Pakistan and Pakistan-sponsored terrorist groups. Because when Taliban was in power in 96, Taliban had sheltered many anti-India terror groups. But now things are different. Taliban is desperately craving for recognition, especially from countries like India. India also has key interests in Afghanistan to protect. We have our security interests, our investments, our key projects, and we hope Taliban can protect them. And if that is possible, India is trying to explore the possibility whether we can have relations with Taliban as well. Right? So now, the former officials of the previous Afghan government at the Heret Security Dialogue, they have urged India to not make that mistake, to not recognize Taliban and accept its envoy. Recently, Taliban has made this move that it is going to send a new envoy to the Afghan embassy in New Delhi, and India might be considering this. So that would be a big step, a very, very big step from treating Taliban as a terrorist outfit, right? Because historically, we have never engaged with Taliban officially. Now we have started talking to Taliban in the last 3 years, and now to accept a Talibani envoy would be a big step, a complete shift in our Afghan policy. So former officials and diplomats of the previous Afghan government, they're urging India not to do that mistake and stand by its historical commitment. But of course, India has its own strategic necessity as well. So this is a interesting development, whether India will accept the Talibani envoy. Will we allow Taliban to represent itself in New Delhi in its embassy? Then if we do that, we would be like other countries like Russia, China, Iran and Pakistan, which have started maintaining ties with Taliban, though they don't officially recognize the Taliban government. Many other countries have rejected Talibani envoys, right? So it's interesting to see whether India will accept the Talibani envoy or not. So this is a developing story, so please pay attention to this topic. Next, another key update regarding the Ukraine war. As you all know, Trump has made it very clear that it's a priority for him to end the war in Ukraine. He has reached out to Russian President Putin and he almost appears to be towing the line of Russia, aligning with Russia, even at the cost of alienating Europe and Ukraine. Trump has stated that he is going to end all the military support to Ukraine, push towards the resolution of the conflict, which might favor Russia essentially, which means Russia might even retain some of the annexed occupied territories. So this will leave Europe weaker, and Trump has even suggested that Ukraine should pay back for all the military aid it has received by giving critical mineral access to the United States. So these are some big interesting developments that are happening, and we saw something at the United Nations yesterday. At the UN Security Council, the US pushed a resolution that does not criticize Russia at all for the war. Instead, it only mourns the loss of lives and calls for immediate peace. It reminds the UN of its role to maintain international peace and security. And this resolution was backed not only by US but by Russia as well. It has been many years since US and Russia voted on the same lines, especially at UN Security Council. Since 2014, since Russia annexed Crimea, US-Russia tensions escalated. Since then, US-Russia have not been on the same page. Every time there's a UN resolution, especially related to Russia or Ukraine, US has voted against Russia. It has always brought out resolutions against Russia, targeting Russia. And Russia has been using its veto to protect itself, as it's a permanent member as well. But for the first time in many years, we are seeing US make a big policy shift. This is a paradigm shift, a mega shift in American foreign policy, where US and Russia have voted on the same side. Because this resolution on Ukraine does not condemn Russia at all. It does not blame Russia. As Trump said, Russia is not to be blamed for this war. In a way, Trump has admitted that NATO, Western countries were the ones which instigated Ukraine, thus instigating Russia to go to war. Now Trump has made ending the war a priority, engaging with Putin directly, looking at lifting sanctions as well. And this could harm Ukraine's interest and sovereignty. So what we are seeing right now is a big shift in the American approach towards Europe and Eurasia region. US may not be too keen in pushing the militarization of Europe and backing NATO. US would like to leave Europe for European Union to manage, while cutting back its own involvement, focusing more on American interests as compared to European interests. So this is a big shift, where on this resolution that was pushed by the US, there was no fingers pointed at Russia for the war, though Russia was the one which violated the UN Charter and instigated this conflict. For the first time, US has not blamed Russia for the conflict officially. And it has only mourned the losses of lives, called for an end to the war, reminded the UN of its purpose, which is to bring peace and security. Of course, other P5 countries, the European permanent members like France and UK, they have not supported this resolution, but US and Russia have been on the same side, and that is the big shift you get to see in American foreign policy. Next, another major shift closer to India. In our neighborhood, a big shift has taken place between our neighbors, Pakistan and Bangladesh. For the first time in many years, direct trade has resumed between Pakistan and Bangladesh. This is also a big development which has an impact on Indian interests. See, since 1971, since the Pakistani atrocities, the genocide that Pakistan committed in East Pakistan, in Bangladesh, there has been a lot of anger and resentment, and generally relations between Pakistan and Bangladesh was never good. Of course, for some years, Bangladesh was under military rule in the late 70s, in 80s as well. There were pro-Pakistani governments also in 80s and 90s, in early 2000 under the BNP. We have seen a pro-Pakistan inclination, but especially under Awami League, when Awami League was in power under Sheikh Hasina. Bangladesh was prosecuting the war criminals of 1971, which Pakistan never liked and appreciated. Bangladesh was condemning Pakistan's ignorance of the genocide it had committed, its failure to apologize for the atrocity it had carried out. So historically, there has been that divide between the Bengali nationalists in Bangladesh and the pro-Pakistan elements. So for many years and decades, they did not have direct trade because of this friction in the relationship, which goes back to 1971. So for the first time, Bangladesh, Pakistan have resumed direct trade by sending basmati rice. Now this is a new opening. It shows the changes that are happening in Bangladesh as well. Ever since Sheikh Hasina's government was thrown out last year, the Awami League regime was toppled. Now there is an interim government under Muhammad Yunus, which apparently is pro-Pakistan. You're seeing a big improvement happening in Pakistan-Bangladesh relations. Their defense relations have started improving. Recently, Bangladesh participated in a naval exercise organized by Pakistani Navy. So these are some big changes happening where Pakistan and Bangladesh are getting closer and closer, and India is worried about the possible rise of pro-Pakistan, anti-India elements, because we have seen in the past how pro-Pakistan, anti-India elements in Bangladesh can support terror groups, be it the Northeast insurgents or other terrorist outfits like Lashkar and Huji, who might pose a threat for Indian interests. So the resumption of trade between them is indeed a concerning development for India, though it is good for the region. As long as Bangladesh doesn't threaten our security interests, it's fine. But the problem is the growing alignment between them in the security domain as well is something that bothers India. So please be aware that trade relations have resumed normally between Bangladesh and Pakistan. Now coming to the prelim section. Last three articles, let's wrap it up quickly. The last naval ship to be imported by Indian Navy would be Tamal, built by Russia. It's a stealth frigate. See, in 2016, India-Russia signed a government-to-government contract to build 4 stealth frigates for the Indian Navy. 2 of them would be produced in Russia and imported directly from Russia, and 2 of them would be built in India by Goa Shipyards Limited as part of Make in India program, which promotes transfer of technology. So Russia would share the technology with us and it would be built indigenously by Goa Shipyard Limited. Now, the last of these stealth frigates is being inducted. A team from the Indian Navy has been sent to St. Petersburg to commission this warship, Tamal, which will be very soon inducted into the Indian Navy. And this would be probably the last imported ship, because today India's expertise has gone up with regard to shipbuilding. That's why it's a very important development. We don't import ships anymore, warships. This would be the last of its kind, at least for now, because for many years we are indigenously building our own ships. Even if it's of a foreign design, we are transferring the technology from them, because we push Make in India Atmanirbhar Bharat initiative. We push the original manufacturers to share the technology and designs with us so we can indigenously develop and produce these warships. So today India's shipbuilding capabilities has improved significantly, and Tamal would be the last of such imported naval ships into the Indian Navy. Then again, relating to maritime security, the Coast Guard of India is in news. Defense Minister Rajnath Singh has attended the investiture ceremony of the Coast Guard, and he has praised the role of the Coast Guard, highlighted the significant role of the Coast Guard, which is crucial for our coastal and maritime security. So both for prelims and mains, you need to understand what is this role of Indian Coast Guard, what does it do? The Coast Guard, which is also one of the armed forces set up through the Coast Guard Act, functions under the Defense Ministry to guarantee the coastal and maritime security of India. It is responsible to protect our oceans and offshore assets, be it protecting and defending our exclusive economic zone, our territorial waters and contiguous zone, or protecting the vast minerals present in our EEZ, from hydrocarbon reserves to the fish and the minerals present, and any offshore assets like oil rigs or any offshore assets including wind turbines which could be present. Protecting, guarding the economic assets of India in the seas and the oceans is the primary responsibility of the Coast Guard. It also provides assistance to those who are in distress at sea by conducting search and rescue operations. Let's say a ship has suffered an accident and the crew is at risk, or let's say there is a natural disaster like a cyclone or a tsunami or rough conditions at the sea. So rescuing mariners and seafarers who are in distress, saving their lives through search and rescue operations is the primary role of Coast Guard of India. So it plays a disaster management role as well. It plays a critical role in tackling organized crime, be it drug trafficking, arms trafficking, piracy, human trafficking. Tackling all sorts of organized crime is a responsibility of the Coast Guard. It also has an environmental role to protect the marine environment, to enable oceanic studies, and even to tackle oil spills. In fact, Coast Guard is the nodal authority to tackle oil spills. Clear? Dealing with such environmental disasters to protect the marine environment, to protect the coral reefs, and even to enable marine studies and oceanic studies. That is the job of the Coast Guard. Finally, it acts as a backup for the Indian Navy during times of war. It forms the second layer of defense in the three-tiered maritime security architecture that has been set up. Coming to the last article, United Kingdom has announced a significant increase in its budgetary allocation to 2.5% of its GDP. Now, this is quite important because it comes in the backdrop of Donald Trump targeting NATO and NATO members for not spending enough. See, NATO countries have a commitment. They have committed to each other to spend at least 2% of their GDP to ensure all NATO countries contribute equitably to ensure their collective security. But US has a valid argument. Donald Trump has a valid point that US has been footing most of the bill, basically paying for European security. As European countries have become complacent with their security, they have not really made higher budgetary allocation for defense and security expenditure. Trump has called for European countries to spend 5% of their GDP on security. And Trump has even threatened to dismantle NATO or even sideline NATO and even withdraw American military support, which has guaranteed European security for decades. So in this backdrop, UK, which was until now spending around 2.3% of its GDP on defense, has scaled up its defense expenditure to 2.5%, and the increased finances comes from cutting down on Britain's international aid. As countries become more conservative, protectionist and inward looking, as you see the rise of the right ideology around the world, as countries look after their own self-interests, the one casualty of this would be reduction in international aid. Britain was a major donor and it would be cutting down on international aid, which can affect many welfare programs. And Britain is looking to divert the international aid towards its own defense expenditure. So this is a big development because many European countries are expected to increase their defense budget to look after their own security, as US is threatening to withdraw the security umbrella it had provided through NATO. So on this note, I bring today's discussion to an end. I hope it's been a detailed and fruitful analysis. I hope you guys have understood all the topics. So do let me know what you think in the comments. And if you like the session, do press the like button. That is it for today. We'll see you tomorrow. Thanks for watching.